This is a reading from The Diary of Jesus by Jean Aulagnier. June 16th, Friday. The week ended and they left in the morning, taking a shortcut to Nazareth. Susanna accompanied them now. Upon arriving in Nazareth, they first went to see Mary of Clopas. The women spent time together while the men accompanied Jesus to the synagogue. Jesus asked his fellow citizens to understand that the Word of God can allow spiritual lepers to be at his side once they were healed and were undergoing spirit purification. June 17th, Saturday. Jesus again taught in the synagogue. He tried to make the crowd understand that his apparent weakness was no excuse to exploit him. This attempt was in vain, since most people did not understand him. Even Joseph and Simon, his oldest cousins, seemed to remain hostile. June 18th, Sunday. They left at dawn. Mary of Clopas accompanied them again, even though she was over 65. The group went through Yaphia and Meribah, where the townspeople remained indifferent. Jesus and his disciples rested in the heat of the day. In the evening they stopped in Bethlehem of Galilee. This time they were greeted enthusiastically by shepherds who had been evangelized by Isaac. Jesus was told that 3 men had borne false witness in order to have an innocent young man, Abel, put to death. Jesus intervened immediately to save Abel's life. He performed an anti-miracle. He confronted the crooks and turned them into lepers. Footnote 27. See Numbers chapter 12, how Moses' sister Miriam had also been turned into a leper in the Sinai desert. June 19th, Monday. Early in the morning, Jesus and his group headed south. They walked through hilly country and then turned west to Capernaum. By nightfall, they had arrived in the vicinity of this port. The group met Isaac, the shepherd disciple, there with many new members. Timon from Clearwater was also there, as well as Joseph of Emmaus and the young man of Korazim. Other people were present: John of Endor, Stephen, Gamaliel's disciple, Abel the ex-leper, whom Jesus had purified the year before, Samuel, Abel's friend, and many others. Jesus again spoke of love as a fire that purifies everything. After this, upon Isaac's request, Jesus gladly accepted his invitation to boat up the coast as far as Phoenicia. The sea was calm and the moon was almost full. Jesus had the fishermen rent 5 boats for the next day. Jesus and his group were going to reinforce Isaac's work along the coast. They would also welcome eventual disciples. The whole group spent the night in some cabins on the shore. They belonged to some fishermen of Purple, whom Isaac knew. Footnote 28. Purple was a shellfish from which a dye was extracted to color the garments of sovereigns. Editor. June 20th, Tuesday. Jesus, the apostles, Isaac, and a few disciples put out to sea at dawn. A hired man piloted the first boat in which Jesus traveled. Peter, Andrew, John, and James took command of the other boats. They went up the coast as far as Sidon, but did not find those people they were looking for, so they headed back to Tyre. June 21st, Wednesday. Tyre was built on a little island. They boated around it and entered a sheltered harbor. This was on the north side of the man-made isthmus that linked Tyre to the mainland. Approximately 100 men were waiting for Jesus early in the morning. They all put out to sea with their little fleet, which included 2 larger fishing boats. They went north and pulled ashore in a pebbly cove. Jesus spoke. After this, they divided up in order to dig mussels, crabs, and some rockfish for lunch. It was hot by then, so the group went to rest in little caves. Jesus, his apostles, and the disciples made it back to Capernaum by evening. They had been sailing at a good clip with a nice northerly trade wind. While they were gone, the women had washed the clothes. Some people had been expecting Jesus, and the word got around that he had returned. After eating, he cured, as usual, a number of unfortunate people. He then preached, as was his custom. He said one must destroy his bad habits to allow faith to grow in God's light and sunshine. They went to sleep right after Jesus had preached, since they had to leave early in the morning. June 22nd, Thursday. At 3 or 4 a.m., Jesus, the 12, and the 5 women headed south. John of Endor came along, as well as Hermasti, a young Philistine from Ashkelon. He had been converted by Isaac and had long desired to follow Jesus. Meanwhile, Isaac and the other disciples were to stay in the area and preach the word. They would meet Jesus later. The moon was setting and it was not yet dawn. They walked silently on the wet beach. They walked for 6 hours and stopped for the hot hours of the day near Dora. They left late in the afternoon and were within sight of Caesarea by about 7:30 p.m. Before entering the town, they ran into a Greek slave who had run away from her master, a lustful Roman. Her name was Syntyche, and she was well read. When I read Maria Valtorta, I pronounced her name Syntyche, but Jean Olanier spelled it out Syntyche. So they had hid her in the carriage meant for Martha and Mary of Magdala. Some of the women joined her, and together they left by carriage for the next village past Caesarea. Around 9 p.m., Jesus and his group entered Caesarea. Once again, Mary of Magdala had to put up with her old companion's sarcasm. June 23rd, Friday. They left the city in the morning. Martha and her sister Mary walked over to their carriage and rode off to visit Mary's old wet nurse. The others went northeast, heading for the east tip of Mount Carmel. As was customary for this time of the year, when the sun became too hot, they waited in the shade for the cool of the evening. They sat in an orchard, and Jesus talked about hope to some vineyard workers who believed in him. From June 2nd on, Jesus and his group spent a few days resting in that area. They had originally planned to rest in Caesarea, but when they met Syntyche, they decided to hurry away from Caesarea to foil the Romans' attempts to find her. June 30th, Friday. Jesus sent out all his apostles to preach except for his cousin James. He told them to preach in the plain of Esdraelon until after the Sabbath. He also asked them to tell Margim's grandfather that they would bring Margim over to see him on their way to Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles. Jesus left with James. They walked until the evening and reached the plateau of Mount Carmel. Jesus asked James to pray all night as well as the next day, July 1st, Saturday. In the evening, Jesus told James plainly what he had hinted at before. Footnote 29. See May 9th, AD 28, page 111, editor. One day, James would be elected church leader of Jerusalem. All the other apostles would be scattered, but James, of David's descent, would go on performing his God-given function in the royal city of David. On the same occasion, Jesus also revealed to his cousin the nature of his passion. Then they slept in the open. July 2nd, Sunday. When the day dawned, they headed back. Jesus said that his future church would have a hierarchy and sacraments. Then he gave James the opportunity to perform his first miracle. James healed a child. Jesus and James met the other apostles at dusk. They were sitting by a campfire in the plain of Esdraelon, and the 3 remaining women, John of Endor and Hermasti, were with them. They informed Jesus that Jehochanan, the Pharisee, had just bought Doris's estate, and Doris's servants now worked for Jehochanan. July 3rd, Monday. Jesus spoke to Jehochanan's servants before dawn. He stressed mutual support and love. Jehochanan's steward came to Jesus as he was just about to leave at daybreak. He assured Jesus of his goodwill towards him. His master, too, was well disposed, especially since the harvest had been plentiful thanks to Jesus' blessing of the crops. Jesus did not speak at length with the steward and immediately headed northeast with his group. When they reached the road to Ptolemy, it was hot, so they stopped for their customary rest. Jesus instructed the 3 women to go home, and told John of Endor and Hermasti to leave that very day for Sycaminum. Jesus also said that while he settled in Capernaum, the apostles would evangelize around that town until the beginning of the moon Tishri, September 10th. Then the apostles would resume their communal life with him. At dusk, they set out again. John of Endor and Hermasti left immediately on their way to the northwest. Holy Mary, Mary of Clopas, and Judas left for Nazareth. Judas had obtained permission to spend some time at Mary's house. He said He was unbearably afraid of himself and needed help. Everyone else headed for Tiberias, and Susanna stopped when they went through Cana. The men sailed from Tiberias, some to Capernaum, others to Betsaida. They all had a very peaceful week. July 8th, Saturday. Luke chapter 6, verse 6. And on the Sabbath day it happened that he went into the synagogue of Capernaum to teach, when there was a man there who had his right hand withered. The scribes and Pharisees, Eli, Uriah, Joachim, and Simon, were watching him to see whether he would restore health on the Sabbath, so that they might have a charge to bring against him. He knew their secret thoughts, and said to the man who had his hand withered, Rise up and come forward. Immediately he rose to his feet. Then Jesus said to them, I have a question to ask you. Which is right to do, good on the Sabbath day, or to do evil? To save life, or to make away with it? And he looked round on them all, and said to him, Stretch out your hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored to him. And they were overcome with fury, debating with one another what they could do to Jesus. The Pharisees had brought the man over, trying to frame Jesus. The man was innocent, however, and Jesus was very kind to him. July 9th to July 16th, an uneventful week went by. July 20th, Thursday. The chief of the synagogue of Nazareth invited Judas along with Jesus' two eldest cousins and a few other people of distinction. After the meeting, Judas went out with Jesus' cousins, Joseph and Simon. They wanted to know certain things about Jesus. Judas found Simon too weak and easygoing and would not say anything. Joseph, however, reminded Judas that he, Joseph, was the eldest in Jesus' family, and that he had the right to know. At this, Judas told them all the things Jesus which seemed wrong to him. After that, he decided to go and meet Jesus and the other apostles right after the Sabbath. July 24th, Monday. Thus, all were gathered at Thomas's in Capernaum. Footnote 30. This, Thomas, was Jesus' host, not his apostle. The master said to them, I am about halfway through my public ministry. The time has now come for you to evangelize by yourselves. In the cool of the evening, they went and sat under some olive trees. Jesus gave them his last apostolic instructions. The 12 paid close attention to Jesus' words. Matthew chapter 10, verse 5. B. Do not go, he said, into the walk of the Gentiles, or enter any city of Samaria. Go rather to the lost sheep that belong to the house of Israel. Believe me, you have your work cut out for you in Israel. And preach as you go, telling them the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Now for people to believe you and seek you, I am going to give you the gift of miracles. Judas exulted. John and James the less remained silent, and some of the others objected, feeling unworthy of this gift. Jesus went on to say, Matthew chapter 10, verse 8, Heal the sick in soul and body, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out devils. You have received the gift of miracles for free. Perform miracles for free. Do not provide gold or silver or copper to fill your purses, nor a wallet for the journey, no second coat, no spare shoes or staff. This is because your apostolic visits will be short for now. We will meet here every Sabbath. Besides, do not worry about what you will eat, because, Matthew chapter 10, verses 10b. The laborer has a right to his upkeep. Whenever you enter a city or village, find out who is worthy to be your host, and stay there until you go away. When you enter this house, you are to greet it, saying, Peace be to this house. If the house is worthy, peace shall come down upon it. If it is unworthy, your peace will come back to you. And wherever they will not receive you or listen to your words, leave that house or that city, and as you leave, shake off the dust from your feet. I promise you, it shall go less hard with the land of Sodom and Gomorrah at the day of judgment than with that city. Remember, I am sending you out to be like sheep among wolves. You must be wary then, as serpents, and yet innocent as doves. Do not put your trust in men. They will hand you over to courts of judgment and scourge you in their synagogues. Jesus abruptly spoke about a more distant future. Matthew chapter 10, verse 18. Yes, and you will be brought before governors and kings on my account, so that you can bear witness before them and before the Gentiles. Only when they hand you over like that, take no thought of what you are to say or how you are to say it. Words will be given you when the time comes. It is not you who will speak. It is the Spirit of your Father that will speak in you. Brothers will be given up to execution by their brothers, and children by their fathers. Children will rise up against their parents and have them put to death. And you will be hated by all men because you bear my name. That name will be saved. That man will be saved who endures to the last. Only if they persecute you in one city, take refuge in another. I promise you, the Son of Man will come before your task with the cities of Israel is ended. A disciple is no better than his master, a servant than his Lord. It is enough for the disciple to fare like his master, the servant like his Lord. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, they will do it much more readily to those of his household. Do not then be afraid of them. What is veiled will all be revealed. What is hidden will all be known. What I have said to you under cover of darkness, you are to utter in the light of day. What has been whispered in your ears, you are to proclaim on the housetops. And there is no need to fear those who kill the body, but have no means of killing the soul. Fear him more, who has the power to ruin body and soul in hell. Are not sparrows sold for 2 a penny? And yet it is impossible for one of them to fall to the ground without your heavenly Father's will. And as for you, he takes every hair of your head into his reckoning. Do not be afraid then. You count for more than a host of sparrows. And now, whoever acknowledges me before men, I too will acknowledge him before my Father who is in heaven. And whoever disowns me before men, before my Father in heaven, I too will disown him. Do not imagine that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have come to bring a sword, not peace. I have come to set a man at variance with his father, and the daughter with her mother, and the daughter-in-law with her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the people of his own house. He is not worthy of me that loves father or mother more. He is not worthy of me that loves son or daughter more. He is not worthy of me that does not take up his cross and follow me. He who secures his own life will lose it. It is the man who loses his life for my sake that will secure it. He who gives you welcome gives me welcome too. And he who gives me welcome gives welcome to him who sent me. He who gives a prophet the welcome due to a prophet shall receive the reward given to prophets. And he who gives a just man the welcome due to a just man shall receive the reward given to just men. And if a man gives so much as a draught of cold water to one of the least of these here, because he is a disciple of mine, I promise you, he shall not miss his reward. After saying all this, Jesus divided them into pairs. Each week they would go out in different pairs. Then they all prayed together out loud. July 25th, Tuesday. They parted early in the morning. The apostolic times were really beginning. Later in the week, Matthew, unfortunately, was hit with a stone, and one of his feet was deeply gashed. July 30th to August 4th, Matthew stayed with Jesus. One morning about midweek, Jesus was preaching to a crowd gathered in front of Thomas's house, when suddenly 3 men arrived and tried to elbow their way up to him. They were disciples of John the Baptist. One of them was Manaen, Antipas's foster brother. The prophet had sent them from his jail in Machaerus, thanks to contacts with the outside world. Indeed, some of his disciples had managed to get hired as servants in Machaerus, and some of the tetrarch's soldiers were in favor of Jesus and his doctrine. These contacts were important, since many of John's disciples were puzzled as to who was this Jesus. Since they found it hard to believe that he was the expected Messiah, John the Baptist sought to convince them that Jesus was the Messiah. For this reason, he asked Manaen to take the 2 disciples who doubted the most to see Jesus. In this way, they could question Jesus and see for themselves. Matthew chapter 11, verse 3. Are you the one whose coming was foretold? They asked as soon as they arrived. Or are we yet waiting for some other? Jesus answered them, Look around me. These people are poor and ill in mind or body, and they want to know God's word. This one, and that other one were ill when they came over, but now they are healed. Go and interrogate them. Then, Matthew chapter 4, verse 4b, go and tell John that your own ears and eyes have what your own ears and eyes have witnessed, how the blind see and the lame walk, how the lepers are made clean and the deaf hear, how the dead are raised to life, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. Blessed is the man who does not lose confidence in me. Tell that to John, and tell him that I bless him with all my love. Then the two said to him, Thank you, Master. Bless us also before we leave. The heat was unbearable, so Jesus invited them to stay with him until the evening. Matthew chapter 11, verse 7. As they went out, Jesus took occasion to speak of John to the crowd. What was it, he asked, that you expected to see when you went out into the desert? Was it a reed trembling in the wind? No, not that. What was it you went out to see? Was it a man clad in silk? You must look in king's palaces for men that go clad in silk. What was it then that you went out to see? A prophet? Yes, and something more. I tell you that a prophet. This is the man of whom it was written, Behold, I am sending before you that angel of mine who is to prepare your way for your coming. Believe me, God has raised up no greater son of woman than John the Baptist, and yet to be least in the kingdom of heaven is to be greater than he. Ever since John the Baptist's time, the kingdom of heaven has opened to force, and the forceful are even now making it their prize, whereas all the prophets in the law before John's time could only speak of things that were to come. And this I tell you, if you will make room for it in your minds, that he is that Elijah whose coming was prophesied. Listen, you that have ears to hear with. As for this generation, to what shall I compare it? It reminds me of those children who call out to their companions as they sit in the marketplace and say, You would not dance when we piped to you, or beat the breast when we wept to you. When John came, he would neither eat nor drink, and they say of him that he is possessed. When the Son of Man came, he ate and drank with them, and of him they say, Here is a glutton. He loves wine. He is a friend of publicans and sinners. Yet it is by her own children that wisdom is vindicated. Jairus, the chief of the synagogue, was somewhat bitter at this point. Barely 100 people had shown up to see Jesus. He said out loud, This was very little for 3 villages like Capernaum, Betsaida and Korazim. Would God not punish such hard-heartedness? Yes, Jesus replied. It is wrong, and they will be punished. Matthew chapter 11, verse 20. Immediately after that, he took occasion to upbraid the cities in which he had done most of his miracles, because they had not repented. Woe to you, Korazim! Woe to you, Betsaida! Tyre and Sidon would have repented in sackcloth and ashes long ago, if the miracles done in you had been done there instead. And I say this, that it shall go less hard with Tyre and Sidon at the day of judgment than with you. And you, Capernaum, do you hope to be lifted up high as heaven? You shall fall low as hell. Sodom itself, if the miracles done in you had been done there, might have stood to this day. And I say this, that it shall go less hard with the country of Sodom at the day of judgment than with you.